everyone. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
How's it going? Happy 5777. It's I think it's the longest name of a year that we've had, at least in a very long time. Many, many syllables. Oklahoma girl meets world, regrets it. Dabbler in much, expert in none. The car accident changed my life. It was embarrassing, so don't ask. These are the few of the 6-word memoirs compiled by Smith Magazine since they launched their project a couple of years ago. You may have heard about it. You may have even written one of your own. But how do we sum up our life in just 6 words? It can be incredibly difficult when each of us is so many things and our stories are layered and multifaceted. We all do have a longer story of self with which we walk in here tonight. The way we see ourselves and understand our place in family, in community, in the world. It's the narrative we construct throughout our lives, tying together experiences and events in a way that makes us make sense. 3rd grade talent show plus summer camp plus late nights in college equal I'm funny. 10th birthday party plus high school field trip plus daily search for keys equal I'm a person who loses things. And countless more equations they can lead to I'm a good friend, I'm athletic, I'm a procrastinator, I'm a giver, I'm a taker, I'm good with money, I'm bad in relationships, etc. Some good things, some not as good, but all part of our story. This year I want to suggest that perhaps it's that personal story of self that fills the pages of the book of life that is open before us during these high holy days. True, the more traditional image is that old man God is sitting up in heaven, looking at every person one by one, determining whether our name will go in the book of life this year. But that does not work for the vast majority of us. It's not our idea of God, nor is it our idea of an annual performance review. What if we didn't imagine the book of life as a ledger in which to hopefully have our names written for the year to come, but instead think of it as a record of the past, of our past, made up of thousands of moments that have led to you being here in this room tonight. That book has birthdays and setbacks, laughter and adventures and grief, kind of like a Facebook feed, only true. And the high holy days come, and they ask us to curl up with a talit and a musaf muffin. Come back tomorrow if you don't know what that is. Spend a little time with the book of our life, to take a look at our relationships and our biggest mistakes and our proudest achievements. As we do, it's actually less about our experiences and more about how we remember those experiences. Social psychologist Daniel Kahneman explains that there's a real discrepancy between how we feel about a situation while we're in it and how we feel about it looking back, what he calls the difference between the experiencing self and the recalling self. If a close friendship ends in a big fight, that will negatively color the way you remember the many good years that came before. We rewrite the past using information and emotions from the present. When we think about memory, we may imagine a neat little filing system in our brain filled with accurate recollections, but it turns out that's not quite true. Studies show counterintuitively that the more we recall an experience, the less accurate the memory of it is. It's how with every retelling, your mortifying middle school moment of stumbling in the cafeteria and dropping your milk turns into a story where your tray full of food goes flying, spaghetti lands on the most popular girl's head, and the star quarterback trips on your orange, breaks his arm, and the season is ruined. So it turns out the book of your life may be less history and more fiction. In some ways, this knowledge is a gift. It tells us that not only is the future fluid, but the past is too. That every time we remember, we're making choices about what stories we hold on to, what details of those stories we focus on, and the frame with which we retell them. We already do this regularly in our lives, like in a job interview, when you're asked about a challenging work situation. Let's say you had a very difficult boss who regularly criticized you in public, whereas in reality, you may have stewed in misery and resentment day in and day out, also known as handling it poorly. That's not the story you're going to tell, at least not if you want that job. Instead, it becomes a story of how you were able to self-manage in a less than ideal environment. What's incredible is that by telling the story differently, we change our own relationship to the past. In his book, 8 Habits of Love, longtime IKAR friend Reverend Ed Bacon writes about an exercise developed by Betty Sue Flowers. In it, a facilitator asks participants to write a brief outline of their autobiography 3 different ways. First, as a victim, then as a hero, then as a learner. As Reverend Bacon explains, those are 3 very different stories with 3 very different energies and 3 very different outcomes. A victim feels the need to be defended, vindicated, or avenged. A hero needs justification, ego promotion, or validation. And a learner seeks illumination, correction, and direction. What an incredible reminder of the power of perspective. A person can remember his high school loneliness only for the pain and rejection, or he can remember it as proof of his resilience. Someone can choose to remember always being the most important person on the team, or the process of learning to share the spotlight. And it's not only about the frame we use on the experiences themselves, but also how that frame informs the way we live in the present. A woman who grew up with an unpredictable and cruel mother chooses to become the most generous and loving partner, mother, and grandmother she can be, and succeeds. A man who loses both of his parents during his teenage years chooses to become a social worker and live his life with gratitude and in support of others who may struggle as he did. We always have a choice. Every year on the Shabbat, immediately before Rosh Hashanah, we read one of the most important commandments, one that I think we particularly need right now. God says, look, I place before you life and death, reward and punishment, uvacharta b'chayim. Choose life so that you will live, you and your descendants. Choose life so you will live doesn't seem to make much sense. How can the result be the same as the thing I'm supposed to choose? It's like saying, choose chocolate so you'll have chocolate. But if we shift our emphasis, this mitzvah is saying something else. Uvacharta b'chayim. It's not just choose life as opposed to death, but choose life so that you will live. To be alive, this verse is telling us, means to direct the course of our lives every single day, to recognize and take advantage of our capacity to choose learning and growing and striving and failing and loving and losing, to be the authors of our story, both in the present, as experiences are happening, and also in how we decide to remember them. As I see it, we're being offered a powerful challenge. Instead of standing passively by while God reviews our record, we get to look at all of those experiences, joyous and painful, that make up our book of life and decide what story they tell. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, wrote that remembrance is the secret of redemption. I'd like to modify that slightly and offer that remembrance of redemption is the secret of redemption. In their great wisdom, the rabbis ordained that we need to mention the Exodus from Egypt every single day, because they understood that if our narrative is only one of slavery, we might never have the inspiration to leave Egypt again. But when ours is the story of walking from slavery to freedom, of great miracles and the impossible becoming possible, then spiritual muscle memory kicks in, and we can see our struggles in the context of a bigger picture, an important part of our journey from narrowness to great expanse. There's a famous story from the Maggid of Dubno of a king who had the most beautiful and precious diamond. The king would regularly take it out to admire it and show it off to guests and visiting dignitaries. One day, he realized that there was a deep scratch in his diamond. Distraught, he called for all of the jewelers and jewel cutters in the land and asked them one by one who could fix his diamond. And one by one, they informed him that there was no way to repair the crack. Until finally, one young diamond cutter stood up and said that she could fix the diamond. But she needed some uninterrupted time to work. The king entrusted this young woman with his treasure and waited impatiently. After 10 days, the jeweler returned, and everyone was eager to see how she had fixed the problem that no other jeweler had thought was fixable. The king picked up his diamond and saw that rather than try and fix the crack, she had carved instead an intricate rose into the diamond, using the crack to form the stem. The king was overjoyed, for now the exquisiteness of his diamond was even greater than before. Each of us has some crack that runs deep and feels to us like it undermines our beauty and potential. A painful relationship with a parent or a sibling, a tragic loss, a surprising betrayal. But with the right tools, with introspection and prayer and self-compassion and courage and honesty and a change in perspective, we may recognize how to use that very brokenness to transform ourselves into someone even more powerful. Ask yourself tonight, what is one memory in your book of life, your personal narrative, that holds you back or boxes you in? And over the next 10 days, what will it take for you to write a different story? A story that perhaps reads more like one woman's 6-word memoir. Painful nerd kid, happy nerd adult. Or, tragic childhood can lead to wisdom. Or, cursed with cancer, blessed with friends. That one was written by a 9-year-old. Or, mistakes were made, but smarter now. I pray that this is a year in which we all pick up the pen being handed to us and write our stories in a way that brings us inspiration, liberation, and healing. And may we each inscribe ourselves in the book of life. Shana Tova.